So this is more on documentary hypothesis or Wellhausen hypothesis. I look at the video and I look like a grizzly mountain man, and I don't like that. Probably because when I started this I didn't care. I'm not talking to impress anybody, but now it's kind of like, yikes. Just look, like, that's not... Why am I showing this stuff off? It's the dumbest thing in the world. Okay. Yeah, the striking difference why we get E and J is J from the start uses the tetragrammaton to call the name God. This is why E uses the word Elohim, God. It's in plural. It's the same way Allah. It's the same word, basically, and it's a plural word for the majesty, like you would, like the royal we kind of thing. People try to say sons of God, or it depends on the usage, but it's God. And that's always used until the burning bush, and it says, it has the actual burning bush account. I am that I am. Moses asked God his name, and he says, I am the existing one. I am that I am. Because it's not a God. God, our God, the existing one, Yahon, the Trinity, is not a God. It's not one of the gods that rules over nature and, does all the weird crap and gets, it's not comparable to a God. Our God is not the gods. It's not, there's no, if you took Zeus and just had Zeus and were a monotheist, you wouldn't be a monotheist. You would just be pagan. If you said, well, there's no other gods but Zeus, or there's no other gods but Apollo or Dionysus, that's, no. You'd be closer, but it's still, that's not God. That's not, I mean, the pagan terms for God that they had to use these things. So he's basically saying, I don't have a name. Well, Jay misunderstood that and saw that as a holy thing and wouldn't, do it. But by the time of E, they were already using Yahweh. So after that, so you know what the name is. It's not the name. It's an identifier. YHVH or YHWH, Yahweh, Jehovah. And from then on, E-text uses it sparingly. And E-text starts with Abraham and is most of the story of Joseph, and is concerned with Moses, and it says Moses and the elders. Now, funny thing, J-text and P-text always say, well, Aaron. No, Aaron was really the guy. Aaron was really, and always, it's funny, there's a point where it's so jumbled where it talks about Moses sinning, and there's the Moabites are there. And then by the end of the story, it's calling them Midianites. And it's because it got spliced wrong. So they just kind of crashed it all together. What's Moses' sin? Oh, well, he wasn't supposed to take credit for it, but he didn't take credit for it. He's supposed to hit the rock, or speak to the rock, not hit the rock. And this, I mean, people go round and round on this. Even Talmudic scholars, like the people who read the Torah all the time, just rev up on this one, and there's no answer. But Yahweh is just says Yahweh, 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 Jehovah, 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 Jehovah. And it's like and it doesn't, nowhere in the text does it tell you. It just assumes like, oh, that's the name. P text follows the kind of like the formula of E. Won't mention the name until the burning bush, but it's still heavily Aaronic priesthood, whereas E-text is pro-Mushite, pro-Moses, pro-Joseph, pro-Northern Israel. P-text and J-text are pro-Southern Judea, because you can see the split of the kingdoms. They're two different identities. That's why you'll hear me say Jews aren't Israelites, and they never identified themselves. They saw themselves as separate. They were Son, they were ancestors of Israel, but they weren't Israelites. They were, the southern kingdom had been different. And then D tries to stand up for both J and E, and tries to refute everything P did. Just undercut him. But he's also trying to tell a history. P is the God that stands away from. P text, God is above. God does not have mercy. God does not really intervene in anything. It's only through the priest that you can go to God, and it's only if you sin, God doesn't. It's not one of his qualities of compassion. It's just you need to do X, Y, and Z to appease the altar, and that's that. And he's the God. He's the God. He's the cosmic God. Whereas E and J are a personal God. This is a God that talks to people. I mean, E, he's talking to people through dreams. He's in J, he's anthropomorphized as walking in the cool of the shade. And even in the Psalms, they're kind of broken up into the same E, J, P, and D. God walking and the God wrestling. I mean, this is J. J really has God like a man. God is wrestling with Abraham. What is this? Now we interpret that as angels, and rightly so. It didn't matter what the writer was intending, which is it's pretty mystical. It's the guiding of the Holy Spirit. Are you okay? But the way it was all put together, the Torah. That's why it makes it. It's a very mystical document, especially. Well, all of the Torah it even affected. I mean, it's more than the sum total of its parts. Originally, you see this sacrifice of Isaac, and then you see the buying of the tomb, and then Sarah's death and the buying of the tomb, which are three different stories that wouldn't have been together at all. But now we get this idea of grief. Oh, she died of a shock of grief, which was never intended by any of the writers. But when put together, so it's very interesting. It actually, to me, it proves the Torah. It doesn't lessen it at all. And again, I think the Torah is higher above any book of the Old Testament, except possibly Jonah, because Jonah is showing you. It's kind of like the key to reading the Old Testament. And I'll go into the book of. I may have made a video about Jonah already. But it's cool to see these things. People will look at documentary about, then it's not the infallible thing. It's like, shut that shit up. I don't mean to swear, but I think it's very foolish to think that. I mean, the more complex and the more intricate I think it is, the more beautiful. That's like showing that a plant doesn't work by magic, therefore there's no God. It's stupid. Both creation accounts I think are good. I don't like to agree with P when it gets into Leviticus, but I think its creation account is far better. God made man and woman. God made man and woman he made them in his own image. J has woman being taken out of the rib of man, which I also like, because I think man needs to find his missing rib. I believe it's not good for man to be alone. This is why I don't like monks, or at least I don't like monasticism. That might be a weakness, I don't know. But you can tell it was a priest that was writing this, and God created the world. God spoke the world into existence, and it is good. It's liturgical. I had somebody point that out to me, and I was like, oh my God, it's right. So you can really see the priest talking. But a lot of times they're trying to paint different pictures, and it's good because you have multiple views. It's like the Gospels. I think that's very funny that So far down the road, we see 4 writers of the Torah, and there's 4 writers of the Gospel. I think that can be kind of a prefiguring. And we see one that not only is part of the Torah, but then goes into the history. And we see Luke, which is, trying to set the full records, set it all straight, and then goes into Acts and the Acts of the Apostles, the history of the early church. We see John with the very cosmic God. We see Mark with the man. I think it's beautiful. We see Matthew with the law. It's the Jewish thing. So it's Matthew is very Jewish. People suggest that it's even an Ebionite gospel. I don't think so. But it's I think it's cool. Though you look at it and people say, oh, that's like a Rorschach test, even though they won't disagree with documentary hypothesis. But I think it's interesting. When you have mysticism, when you can see beauty, it's beautiful. I love it. So I think people get the impression that I hate the Bible or something like that, or that thing we don't, I think it has been used as a weapon, and it's hurt many people. Oh, this and that. It's like, when they're talking about stoning people in the Old Testament, Christ said, no, I have it. That's the old way, when you were locked under kings and all that stuff and sacred. No, this is the true way. This is the better way. I've come in full. So when people say, it says in Leviticus, do you wear woven, are your fiber, do you wear this jacket? I would be killed, because it's polyester and leather, or nylon and leather. You can't wear blended fibers. Do you stay away from all menstruating women? No, a lot of those things were just good sense, like the kosher laws. The kosher laws so you wouldn't get sick. People didn't eat pig because you got, what is that? Oh, I forgot what trichina, I think it is, the trichina worm. I may be mispronouncing that, but you know that thing in science class where you pour hydrogen peroxide on a pork chop and you see the worms crawl out. Shellfish are the bottom feeders of the sea. That's why it says it must have fins and scales. So you wouldn't need a shark, you wouldn't need an octopus, you wouldn't need, some clam or anything, shrimp, a lobster, all that garbage, which coincidentally is why all that stuff got left out of the fast, because nobody ate that, so they never put a restriction on it. So in your fasting you can eat, and even in the strictest fast you can eat shellfish, because it's not even considered meat. It's like, it's garbage, the animals that you kill on land must chew the cud and have a cloven hoof. Horse doesn't have a cloven hoof. A pig has a cloven hoof, but it doesn't eat the grass. It eats shit. They can't eat carrion. You can't eat birds that would kill. Even the insects. This is some. If you just had those food laws, you would survive better, and you stay clear of a hell of a lot of diseases. The animal can't be sick. It can't have already been dead. These things like that. Now, I think kosher should be outlawed. The kosher animals, just like halal. I think it needs. I'm no PETA supporter, but I don't believe an animal should suffer, and I believe all animals should be anesthetized before being killed. That may sound weak to many people, but I think if we can stop pain, then we should. That's why I believe that there's no cancer patient that should ever die. In most cases, they never die of the cancer. They die of a morphine overdose, which I think is the right thing to do. This video is ending. I know I kind of got off into stuff like that, but the Torah is beautiful, and that's what I want to go into when I'm talking about documentary hypothesis. It's not downgrading at all. It's awesome. All right, peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. Oh yeah, correction. I read a quote saying I'm a Serbian Orthodox, and I'm Serb Orthodox, and I don't believe in evolution. I'm Antiochian. I'm not Serb. There's no Serb blood in me, but I have a heart for the Serbian people, and I think they were wronged horribly during the 90s and into the 2000s. So peace to you, and that sucks what NATO and the US did. It wasn't right. And even if I get called crazy for that, Omarska and Ternopil were not death camps. They weren't. Take it easy. Why am I showing this stuff off? It's the dumbest thing in the world. Okay. Yeah, the striking difference why we get E and J is J from the start uses the tetragrammaton to call the name God. This is why E uses the word Elohim, God. It's in plural. So this is more on documentary hypothesis or Wellhausen hypothesis. I look at the video and I look like a grizzly mountain man, and I don't like that. Probably because when I started this I didn't care. I'm not talking to impress anybody, but now it's kind of like, yikes. Just look, like, that's not burning bush, and it says, it has the actual burning bush account. I am that I am. Moses asked God his name, and he says, I am the existing one. I am that I am. Because it's not a God. God, our God, the existing one, Yahon, the Trinity, is not a God. It's not one of the gods that rules over nature and, does all the weird crap and gets, it's not comparable to a God. It's the same way Allah, it's the same word, basically. And it's a plural word for the majesty, like the royal we kind of thing. People try to say sons of God, or it depends on the usage, but it's God. And that's always used until our God is not the gods. It's not. There's no. If you took Zeus and just had Zeus and were a monotheist, you wouldn't be a monotheist. You would just be pagan. If you said, well, there's no other gods but Zeus, or there's no other gods but Apollo or Dionysus, that's no. You'd be closer, but it's still you. That's not God. That's not. I mean, the pagan terms for God didn't. That they had to use these things.